By the time Eli Ward got to Bracken Yard, the town had already decided Tommy Quill died by weather. They had decided it in the careful way people used when they needed a lie to sound like experience. Freeze night. Bad footing. Long shift. The kind of death railroads had always made room for if you stayed near them long enough. Sheriff Nolan Creel gave him the summary before Eli had both boots on the ballast. Switchman, 32, Creel said. Likely slipped while crossing between the rear cuts. We found a flask in his coat. Yard's been fighting ice since dusk. He spoke like a man offering a professional courtesy. He was broad through the chest, good coat, hat clean of snow in a way that suggested someone else kept brushing it for him. Eli looked past him. Tommy Quill lay under the blue work lights between the third and fourth cars of Cut 402. A grain consist strung half a mile through the frozen ladder tracks. The body had already been pulled clear and covered, but the steel around him was still talking. Eli had spent 9 years walking scenes people wanted over with. He had learned to take the first story the way he took a weather report. Useful for knowing what people feared, not for knowing what happened. He crouched beside the rail. The ballast at the reported fall point was barely torn. The lantern glass was shattered 30 feet east, near the air hose between cars 7 and 8. The brake shoes on the rear half of the cut still held a skin of frost, too smooth to have come off under a full charge. You took blood already? Eli asked. Creel nodded. State labs on it. Who moved him? Yard crew. Before photos? Creel's jaw shifted once. Before he froze there all night. That was not an answer. Eli stood and looked up the line of cars until it vanished into blowing snow and sodium light. On the far end, the lead engines waited dark and idling, their windows yellow against the black. Yardmaster Wade Larkin came toward them through the crunching cold with a folder in one gloved hand, and the expression of a man who had practiced looking calm for other people's disasters. Mr. Ward. He offered the folder before he offered the hand. Switch list, crew sheet, weather notes, preliminary incident log, whatever helps you move fast. Eli took the folder without opening it. You need 402 out this morning. Larkin smiled with only half his face. Everybody needs something this morning. Do you? I need a dead man treated honestly and a live railroad kept moving. People who said both halves of a sentence so evenly were almost always willing to spend one to protect the other. Eli walked the cut from Tommy's body marker toward the lantern. The snow had started over twice since the reported incident time, but enough of the earlier disturbance remained for him to see it. Tommy had not been moving away from the cars. The heel drag and knee mark both faced the line. He had braced, he reached the lantern glass, then the dangling hose between 7 and 8. The ankle cock on the rear side sat half open, not full. The glad hand seal had fresh scoring on it. He glanced back at Larkin. When did you finish your air test? Crew says they were still in sequence when Tommy went down. Crew says. That's right. Eli looked along the brake shoes again. Rear half never got a full set. Larkin's expression held. You can tell that from standing there? I can tell you don't like that I can. Creel exhaled steam beside him. We're not doing a circus here, Ward. Eli stayed with the steel. Tommy wasn't crossing randomly. He was in front of the move. That's a reach, Creel said. No. A reach is calling this a stumble before daylight. He saw the sheriff's face cool by degrees. Good. Anger made people show which part of the lie they owned personally. At the sound of a truck door slamming somewhere near the tower, all 3 men looked up. A woman in a canvas work jacket was striding down the service path with snow in her hair, and fury held together so tightly it had become a kind of balance. Mara Quill stopped 5 feet short of Creel and looked past him to Eli. You're the state man? Eli Ward. Good, she pointed at the cut. My brother did not die drunk and stupid. Creel started to answer. Mara kept speaking over him without raising her voice. Tommy knew this yard better than Wade's son knows his own truck. He didn't go between a live cut without looking, and he didn't carry a flask on switch duty because our father would have skinned him alive for it before the railroad ever had the chance. Larkin made a small open-palmed gesture. Mara, this isn't helping. Helping what? She asked. The truth or your paperwork? Eli watched her eyes rather than her anger. Grief made people say wild things. Competence under grief made them say useful ones. What did he tell you before tonight? Eli asked. That turned her to him fully. He said they were rushing departures again. Markin laughed once through his nose, not because anything was funny. Everybody rushes in winter. Mara ignored him. He called them ghost pulls. Cuts moved before the break sequence and before the books matched the move. Said if you complained, Wade told you the river didn't care about feelings, and Judge Price didn't care about inspection windows. Creel said, Careful. Mara looked at the sheriff with something flatter than hate. My brother's dead, you used up careful. Eli asked, Why didn't Tommy file it? Maybe he did. Her mouth tightened. Maybe filing it here is how you end up under a train. The wind shifted and brought the smell of diesel hard off the engines. Eli walked with Mara toward the tower, while Creel and Larkin stayed behind with their scene and their impatience. He did not have to look back to know they were watching the distance between him and the cut, measuring how much damage a quiet outsider could do before breakfast. What was Tommy's job tonight? Eli asked. West Ladder and outbound checks on 402. Mara shoved frozen fingers through her hair. He was supposed to ride the rear and verify air before Dale took the cut to the river. Dale? Our father? Engineer. That made Eli stop once in the snow. Your father was taking 402 out. At 5:30, she looked toward the dark engines. If Wade hasn't bumped him yet? Eli turned his head toward the lead end again. The yellow windows in the cab no longer looked like light. They looked like a clock. Did Tommy call anyone? Me twice. I was on a road call at the fuel rack and missed both. She swallowed once, hard enough for him to hear it. Then he texted, If he runs it early, come to the nose. Whose nose? Lead engine. They climbed the tower stairs into a room full of old heat and newer screens. Frozen boots, switch maps, coffee sour in the air. A young dispatcher with fright in his posture looked away when Mara entered. That told Eli more than half the files Larkin had handed him. Pull the radio log for 402 between 3:30 and incident time, Eli said. The dispatcher glanced toward the floor below as if Larkin's permission might rise through to concrete. Now, Eli said. The kid obeyed. Good. Fear ran fast in closed systems, but so did relief when someone else finally named the right authority. The playback was thin and dirty with static. Switch call, break call. Wade Larkin's voice coming in too calm over the yard channel, another crewman confirming alignment on the west ladder. Then a gap, then Tommy, clipped and breathless. Hold 402, hold it. Rear air isn't through. Silence. Then Larkin again. Copy, keep the line clear. Nothing after that for 16 minutes. Mara stared at the speaker like she could force the missing piece out through rage alone. He would have called again, she said. If he had the chance, Eli said. She looked at him sharply. You believe me. I believe the rear brakes are cold and your brother died facing the train. That was enough. Not comfort, better than comfort. She dug into her jacket and pulled out her phone. Tommy hid things when he got nervous. Not from us. From this place. Her thumb moved. A cloud backup opened. One unsent voicemail file sat time-stamped 4:51 a.m. Mara pressed play. Tommy's voice came through with wind around it, young and fast, and already too close to fear. Mare, if 402 leaves before sunup, it's not weather. They ran it without air again. Wade's got Creel standing in the lot, and Dale still doesn't know. If something happens, go to the nose. You hear me? Go to the nose. The room held still after the message ended. Then Eli heard it beneath the words, the thing that made the whole scene lock into place. Tommy had not been afraid he might die in a dangerous job. He had been afraid they were going to move the train anyway. By 8 o'clock, the town had changed tactics. No one argued weather as aggressively anymore. Eli had damaged that version too early. Instead, Hollow Ben began offering him the larger, softer lie. Survival. Winter windows. 50 families depending on grain loans making the river before ice thickened again. A town too small to absorb one more delay and one more federal freeze. Judge Helen Price gave him that version in her chambers above Main Street, where the radiator hissed and the framed photographs on her wall showed river christenings, scholarship dinners, and the kind of local philanthropy that made power look civic. Nobody is asking you to ignore a death, she said. We're asking you to understand where you are. Eli stood instead of sitting. He preferred people at desk height when they were trying to turn necessity into innocence. Where am I? In a county that ships grain or starves. Through illegal departures. Her face did not move. That took work. Through hard choices. A hard choice is cutting hours. This was a man under steel. She folded her hands. If Wade Larkin pushed too hard, we'll deal with Wade Larkin. But if you stop Bracken cold on speculation, you will not only bury one quill. You'll bury payroll all over this county. There it was. The real prayer of closed machines. Not that the act be excused, but that the body count be distributed until moral weight became logistics. Eli said, Tommy left proof. For the first time, Helen Price looked directly worried instead of merely disciplined. Did he? He told his sister to go to the nose. She was too smart to ask which nose. Mr. Ward, she said quietly, towns this size survive by handling things inside their own weather. That's a beautiful sentence, Eli said. Bad luck you used it on me. He walked out before she could call it disrespect and make it useful. Mara was waiting in his truck outside the courthouse, boots on the floor mat, face set toward the windshield. How'd the Queen take it? She asked. Like a woman protecting payroll from the dead. Mara nodded once. That sounds like her. She had spent the hour Eli was upstairs going through Tommy's things in the Quill garage with her father too numb to stop her. She handed Eli a folded switch list, greasy from old fingers. Tommy circled the units on 402's lead consist. See the notation here? Eli looked. Under the lead engine number, Tommy had drawn a small triangle and written nose. He didn't mean go to the front of the train, Eli said. He meant the nose compartment on the locomotive. Mara watched him see it. Storage behind the front access panel. Road crews dump chain, gloves, spare hoses in there. Most cops never think to look, because they don't like getting their hands dirty around air gear. Would Tommy hide a card there? If he needed it to stay on the engine until someone who knew him found it. They drove back to Bracken Yard by the levee road. Snow blew low over the river and packed white against the rusted service bridge downstream of the main ladder. The bridge led to the old river spur and Price elevator, where outbound grain transfers were staged for barges when highway routes froze. Everything in Hollow Bend pointed toward movement. Everything in Eli said, the truth was moving too. Cut 402 still sat on track west, but the yard had changed around it. A county deputy now idled near the lead units. 2 maintenance trucks had appeared without maintenance happening. Larkin believed in visible normalcy. It was how men like him kept panic looking like operations. We go straight? Mara asked. No, we go like we're supposed to be here. She almost smiled. That would be new. Mara walked first, carrying a tool roll and wearing the expression of a woman already angry at being delayed by incompetence. Eli followed with his badge visible and a clipboard he had not needed until that moment. The deputy at the nose compartment stepped forward. Restricted, Eli kept moving. State investigation. Sheriff said nobody touches the engines until clearance. Then the sheriff can read a statute when he gets tired of embarrassing himself. The deputy hesitated just enough for Mara to swing the access panel open. Cold metal. Grease. Coiled chain. Spare hose. Shop rag. And tape tie inside the compartment lip, almost invisible under a strip of road grit, a black micro SD sleeve. Mara's breath caught. Tommy, she said. Eli reached for it. Hands where I can see them, Sheriff Creel said. The yard had closed behind them quietly. One deputy on Mara's left, one on Eli's right, Creel coming between the rails with Wade Larkin 5 steps behind and not cold at all. That card is evidence, Eli said. Exactly. Creel held out his hand, so you'll surrender it. To the man who pre-wrote the scene? Creel's eyes flattened. You are outside your lane, Ward. No. Eli slipped the sleeve into his own palm without looking away. I'm inside the only lane that matters today. Larkin sighed as if everyone present had disappointed him morally. Mara, don't make this uglier. My brother's already dead, Wade. Ugly came early. The first deputy grabbed her elbow. She reacted like a railroad worker, not a civilian. Short turn, shoulder drop, nearly breaking the man's grip before the second deputy caught her other arm. Creel said, That's obstruction. Theft too, if we're being generous. Theft from who? Mara said. My brother? Eli moved before the sheriff expected him to. Not wild. Fast enough. He caught Creel's wrist as the man went for his coat, redirected the reach, drove him once into the locomotive step, and stripped the radio from his hand. The whole yard held its breath. Then Larkin yelled, "Move 402, now." The engines answered before Eli could fully turn, not with speed. With slack. The deep iron knock ran down the cut one car at a time, a sound older than explanation. Headlights brightened through the blowing snow. Somewhere in the lead cab, Dale Quill had taken power on a train he believed was only late. No, Mara shouted. She kicked free long enough to lunge toward the nose compartment. A deputy dragged her back hard by the jacket. Eli shoved the other deputy off his path and made 3 steps before Creel caught him at the hip and drove both of them against the engine side. The card sleeve left Eli's hand. For one blind second he thought it had gone under the wheels. Then he saw it. Not on the ground. Caught in the lip of the open compartment as the locomotive began to pull. Larkin saw it too. The relief that crossed his face was small and monstrous at once. "Close it," he snapped. One of the yardmen already moving with the train slapped the access panel shut. The evidence disappeared inside the engine nose. Mara made a sound Eli would hear later when things were quiet enough to punish him. Creel twisted Eli's arm high enough to make a point. "You assaulted an officer. You moved a fatal cut. I moved a town past one bad night." Eli stopped fighting for exactly long enough to listen. The train was leaving with uneven pull, too much lag between set and response. Even in the noise he could hear what Tommy had heard before dawn. The air sequence was wrong. He looked down the rails toward the river. 402 was not merely carrying proof out of town. It was still a bad train. Creel shoved him toward a deputy's cruiser. Mara was already against the other one, hands pinned behind her, hair full of snow and grease. "Dale doesn't know," she yelled at Eli over the engine noise. "He still doesn't know." Then cut 402 kept pulling. Reg markers shivering in the dark, Tommy's last truth riding out on the same steel that had killed him. Eli got out of the cruiser because Sheriff Creel trusted anger more than good procedure. The sheriff had put him in the back seat unsearched except for the obvious, too busy watching 402 clear the west switch and too eager to decide later what the charge stack would look like. Men who thought in stories always failed at the small pockets reality hid in. Eli's spare cuff key lived in the hem of his glove for cold weather scenes when local law got theatrical. He had it under the pin in 20 seconds. The deputy outside never heard the click over the locomotives and wind. By the time Creel looked back from Mara's car, Eli was already out the far door, over the ditch, and running the service road toward the bridge. He heard Creel shout his name once. It did not matter. The geometry mattered. 402 would take the river spur, because that was where the lie still worked. If Larkin got the cut across the old service bridge and into Price Elevator's transfer lane, he could call it an ordinary emergency export move, deny any premature departure, and let the evidence travel downstream with the engines. But Tommy had not died over paperwork. He had died over air. Eli ran while thinking through brake propagation the way other men thought through prayer. Rear half only partially charged. Heavy grain load. Freeze night. Bridge grade descending just enough to punish optimism. If Dale thought he had full train behind him and Larkin kept rushing him over radio, the bad sequence would reveal itself where stopping room narrowed and steel stopped forgiving. The service road curved along black water and broken ice. Ahead, the bridge tower showed weak yellow through the weather. The old span had not been modern for years. Hollow Bend kept it because it was cheaper to maintain a useful relic than to admit how much of the town still depended on off-book paths. Eli hit the tower stairs breathing knives. Inside, the room was empty except for switch levers, a dead heater, and the emergency radio set mounted on the north wall. He grabbed the handset and keyed state emergency access with his badge code. Cut 402. This is State Investigator Eli Ward on Bridge Emergency. Engineer, answer now. Static. Then Dale Quill, older than Tommy's voice had been, and already tired in the way working men sounded when they realized too late they had been made part of something unforgivable. This is 402 lead. Who the hell is on emergency? Your son died stopping this move. Silence so hard Eli thought the line had dropped. Then Dale said, very carefully, say that again. Tommy called it. Rear air never fully came through. They moved you early and put his proof in your nose compartment. If you take the bridge at track speed, that bad set is going to announce itself with your whole train behind it. On another channel, Larkin's voice cut in sharp. 402, ignore that traffic. Keep coming. Bridge is yours and river crew is waiting. There it was. Not hidden now. Not careful. Eli keyed over him. Dale, listen to the train, not Wade. Tell me what you've got in the handle. A long exhale from the engine cab. Then, feels soft behind 20. Delayed bite. Because the rear never came in. Start feathering independent and stretch the slack. Do not trust a full-service set. Larkin came back hotter. You keep that train moving. That's an order. And there was the second voice Eli needed, Sheriff Creel in the background, closer to an open mic than he understood. Just get him over the bridge and into elevator lane. We'll deal with the rest here. Open channel correction, Eli thought. Not because they were stupid. Because pressure always made protected men believe the only dangerous audience was the room they were standing in. He switched the emergency sec from local to full recorded dispatch feed. A red light blinked on. Every word now had somewhere bigger to live. Dispatch, copy all traffic on 402 bridge emergency, Eli said. State fatal scene linked to unauthorized departure and compromised brake test. Preserve the record. The dispatcher answered at once, colder and cleaner than anybody in Hollow Bend. Copied. Record preserved. That was when the tower door banged open. Creel came in first, snow on his shoulders and pistol low in one hand, not yet raised because he still wanted this to be an intimidation scene instead of the crime it was becoming. Mara was behind him, one wrist cuff dangling from a broken chain to her belt loop. She had gotten loose the way railroad families got loose, by deciding hardware was not a moral authority. Creel saw the red dispatch light and understood too much too late. Get off that radio. Eli kept the handset up. Nolan, say bridge lane one more time for the state. Creel lunged instead of answering. Eli met him halfway. Not clean like a gym, clean like necessity. Wrist to forearm, step inside, gun arm redirected into the wall, shoulder through the body until the sheriff struck lever housing and dropped the pistol. Mara kicked it under the console before it settled. On the radio, Dale said, She's not holding, Eli. Eli snatched the handset back up. How far to bridge lead? 300 yards. Mara, Eli said, without looking away from Creel, who was fighting up from the floor with humiliation stronger than pain. What did Wade line? She was already at the route board. Spur diverter after the bridge. He wants them on elevator lane, not main. Can you hold main? I can do better. Her hands moved across the old control panel with the speed of someone who had learned machines before she learned to trust the people giving orders through them. A relay snapped. Outside, somewhere in the snow and iron dark, points shifted. Larkin's voice exploded over the channel. Who touched my switches? Mara keyed the tower local without ceremony. Woman whose brother you buried under your train. That shut him up for half a breath. Long enough for fear to replace command. Dale came back on emergency. Strain audible now beneath the engine noise. I've got the bridge in the glass. Take her down. Slow and straight. Do not chase Wade's clock. Rears surging. I know. Stay with the independent. Creel made it to one knee and looked not at Eli or Mara but at the red record light. Men like him could absorb violence. Public memory hurt them worse. Helen will bury you both for this, he said. Mara did not turn. She couldn't bury Tommy. That's the problem. Outside, the bridge began talking through its structure. Not collapse. Load. A deep, vibrating complaint that old steel made when asked to carry one more bad decision. Eli listened to the train through Gale's breathing. Now, Eli said, bail off 2 pounds. Let the slack run in. Again. The reply came after a second that felt larger than the river below them. Got it. Then, softer, almost to himself, Tommy knew. Yes. Christ. Larkin jumped onto the open channel again. no longer calm enough to remember how guilt sounded when disguised. If you stop on that bridge, you freeze the whole line, push it through. Dispatch answered before Eli could. Cut 402, hold current. Any further contrary instruction is unauthorized and recorded. That was the moment the machine broke. Not when Eli hit the sheriff, not when Mara changed the route, not even when the record light came on. It broke when a bigger system heard the smaller one naked and unimpressed. The train noise changed, less pull, more resistance. The long scream of steel coming under control in bad conditions. Dale said, "She's coming down." Eli exhaled for what felt like the first time since dawn. "Hold her there." When the final slack knock ran up the cut and died, the bridge room went so quiet Eli could hear river ice ticking below. Mara closed her eyes once, opened them again, went to the tower window. The lead locomotives stood half on the bridge, headlights pointed into white air. Behind them, grain cars vanished one by one into the storm. No wreck, no burial, no clean downstream disappearance, just a stopped truth. Creel sagged back against the wall as county sirens grew faintly from the yard behind them, too late and pointed the wrong direction like everything else he had done that morning. Eli went outside with Mara and down the frozen stairs toward the stopped lead engine. Dale climbed from the cab slower than a man his age should ever have to climb after learning what his son's last hour had been. His face was gray with cold and the shape of a grief that had not found its voice yet. "You Eli Ward?" he asked. "Yes." Dale nodded once, then looked at Mara as if needing permission to still be her father in public. She stepped into him before either of them could ruin it with speech. Eli turned away long enough to open the locomotive nose compartment. The card sleeve was still there behind a chain, grease dark and ordinary. Tommy's whole final argument fit between two fingers. He held it up so Mara could see. She came over, eyes bright but steady now. "Can you play it?" "At the yard office." "No." She looked past him at the bridge, the stopped cut, the dawn beginning to bleed up under the clouds. "Here." So Eli used his field tablet in the cold, kneeling on bridge timber while Dale stood beside Mara and the locomotives idled softly, as if ashamed of the men who had used them. The first clip showed Tommy's gloved hand opening the same nose compartment. The second showed his camera tucked low toward the rear of the consist, aimed down the cut while his voice whispered the time and air status. On the screen they saw it plainly. Wade Larkin on radio clearing an early pull. Tommy calling hold because rear air was not through. Creel's cruiser in the lot long before any emergency existed. The first shove, Tommy stepping into frame with lantern high, trying to stop a move everyone later called weather. The video jolted once, then ended in black. Dale made one sound and cut it off himself with the back of his hand. Mara stood motionless through the whole thing. When it was done, she took Tommy's lantern from the service step, where someone had set it after the scene, and rested it on the bridge rail beside her. "He was doing the job right," she said. No one argued. State units arrived before full daylight. Not because Hollow Bend invited them. Because dispatch had heard enough to make invitation irrelevant. By the time Judge Price reached the bridge road in her county sedan, the story had already escaped the room it was born in. She got out into hard wind and red lights, and stopped when she saw Eli beside the locomotives with the state captain and the evidence case already sealed. There was no speech worth making after that, and to her credit she understood it. Eli gave his statement, then another. Then the quick field walk with the state captain through the bridge sequence and the recorded channels. Creel was taken off the road by his own neighboring county contact, which seemed to hurt him worse than cuffs. Larkin tried once to explain the town in terms of necessity, and was told correctly that necessity did not authorize homicide. When the official motion finally overtook the bad one, the morning felt almost gentle. Snow had thinned to loose white threads. Bracken Yard lay in the pale first light with cut 402, still waiting where it should have waited the first time. Silent now except for the occasional settling knock from cooling steel. Eli found Mara and Dale near the bridge approach. Dale held Tommy's lunch pail in one hand like he had only just remembered it existed. "You heading out?" Mara asked. "Soon." She studied him for a second. He had gotten used to that look over the years. The one locals gave men who appeared at the exact wrong moment for a system, and the exact right moment for the truth. Half gratitude, half uncertainty about what happened after the outsider left. "They're going to say they didn't all know," she said. "Some of them didn't. And the ones who did?" Eli looked back toward the yard. "Now they don't own the first sentence anymore." That was enough for her. He could tell because she stopped asking for more. Dale stepped forward and held out Tommy's lantern. "He ought to stay with family," Eli said. "It will." Dale's voice was rough but upright again. "I just wanted you to see it clean." The glass had been replaced with a spare from the cab locker. The metal frame was bent near the top where Tommy must have hit the ballast, but the light worked. Dale thumbed it on once. Pale yellow, steady. He kept saying this yard was going bad in a way Steele could hear before people could, Dale said. "I thought he was young and angry." Mara took the lantern from him. "He was young and right." Eli nodded. "Because there was nothing better than that." He left Hollowbend just after sunrise. The levee road took him high enough to see Bracken Yard laid out. Against the river, tracks silver under thawing light, bridge still down, nothing moving until the right people said it could. That was the only kind of quiet he trusted. By noon another scene somewhere else would already be cooling under somebody else's first lie. He would go there because that was the job. But for 1 mile outside town, with the river black and honest beside the road, Eli let himself believe Steele could sometimes be returned to the truth before the day was fully spent.